So today we are continuing on with my favorites slash least favorites series for the first half of the year. And last year I did favorite authors, but this year I wanted to include the opposite. So in this video, I'm going to tell you my top 5 favorite authors of the first half of 2021, as well as my top 5 least favorite authors for 2021. Now, with my top 5 favorite authors for the first half of 2021, I'm not doing a ranking order, but don't worry, I am doing them with my least favorite. So let's just go in any random order and start off with my man, Mr. Brandon Sanderson, or as I affectionately refer to him as Mr. Brando Sando. This guy is just absolutely incredible. I was introduced to Brandon Sanderson last year in February. I did not know of him before then. I had never heard of him before then, and yet I said that I was a book lover who loved fantasy. What's going on here? But ever since I heard of Brandon Sanderson, I have not been able to stop reading his books. In 2021, for the first half of the year, I gave 3 of his books 5 stars. The Emperor's Soul, which is an adult fantasy novella. Mistborn's Secret History, which is also an adult fantasy novella, and White Sand Volume 1, which is an adult fantasy graphic novel, which is just a fun way to refer to a comic book. But I have loved Brandon Sanderson ever since I first read this book, Mistborn: The Final Empire. So I read this book in either late February or early March of 2020, and there was a spell placed upon me, and suddenly I just fell in love with Brandon Sanderson. And the more I read of Brandon Sanderson, the more obsessed I became. To the point, you guys, that I currently have a goal to read every single published book in the Brandon Sanderson Cosmere timeline by the end of the year. And this is doable, which makes it even more insane because there are so many books, and some of them are extremely long, like the Stormlight Archives, which are at least 1,000 pages for every book. So it's insane how much I love this guy. Next up, again, it's in no particular order, but next up is Cassandra Clare. So I ended 2020 having heard a lot about this author, but there are also some readers who have read her works who didn't like her, and they've certainly voiced their opinions quite loud and quite proudly. One thing I love most about Cassandra Clare, however, is the way she wraps up her books. Every one of the books so far in this Shadowhunter series that I've read, in the first 3, is that she does epilogues that are so incredibly well-rounded that any author who attempts to do an epilogue should take a leaf out of Cassandra Clare's books. She makes sure that the reader leaves each of her books completely satisfied by checking in with the remaining characters. She does it in such a good way that you can't help but leave the book going, okay, I know how everyone is and I'm ready for the next one, which is just so good. My next favourite author would have to be A.A. Milne, who is the original author for the Winnie the Pooh series. If you love any of the viewing mediums of Winnie the Pooh, whether it be the early movies, the modern movies, the TV series, whatever it is, then I highly recommend at least picking up book number 1. A.A. Milne did an amazing job, and well, this is not the first book to do this for me this year, but I got to the end of this book and all I could think was, man, Disney fluffs up and makes sweetness out of a lot of things, because the characters in this series, while they are the same characters that we get from any Winnie the Pooh that you might see, they're very different. Disney seems to make these characters a little not so bright, where A.A. Milne never intended to do that. She has some very smart characters in these books. Love the original works and can't highly recommend them enough. Her character work, her plots, just incredible. My next author on this list is Phil Stamper. So in 2021 I read this book, which is his second published work, As Far As You'll Take Me, and in 2020 I read his debut published work, The Gravity of Us. I was blown away with just how amazing Phil Stamper is as a writer. Not only was the plot good and were the characters great, but Phil Stamper touches upon some really important LGBTIQ+ issues issues in this book, and I walked away from it, even though it was only one book that I read of his, fully trusting him. And aside from Brandon Sanderson, this book, his second book, was the only book that I was saying I'm happy to break my TBRs and everything for this book. I was talking so much about this book towards the end of the year, saying I can't wait to read it, I don't want to know what it's about, I want to go in blind, I completely trust Phil Stamper, and I had every reason to continue to do so because it was just so good. The guy is fantastic, and he is the Hail Mary that we should call for LGBTIQ plus works. If you're in the market for an LGBTIQ plus YA book featuring two guys in a relationship dealing with LGBTIQ plus issues, you can't go past Phil Stamper. The guy is awesome, and I cannot wait for his third book. The moment it comes out, you know you're going to hear a lot about it from me on this channel. And my final favourite author to make my top 5 favourite authors for the first half of 2021, without a doubt, has to go to Rachel Ryan. The Woman Outside My Door is a book that I read in June, so it was an incredibly recent read, but I knew the moment that I read this that I just implicitly trust Rachel Ryan just as much as I trusted Phil Stamper. Rachel Ryan's debut novel, The Woman Outside My Door, is an adult thriller written in a way that the thrillers should be written. I have read a number of disappointing, in my view, thrillers this year, but Rachel Ryan did everything right. And she made me so happy, so excited. If you love thrillers, you really should read this book because she ticks every box. I really hope that Rachel Ryan plans to release another book the moment that there is another book out there by Rachel Ryan that is coming to a bookstore soon near you. Best believe it is going to be advertised like there is no tomorrow on this channel. Rachel Ryan fully deserves to make it into this list because she gets it. She knows how to write thrillers in the best possible way, ticking all the boxes. Congratulations and welcome, Rachel Ryan. Yes, welcome, Rachel Ryan, and congratulations to all of the top 5 authors that made it into my favourite authors for the first half of 2021 list. But now it is time to, for the first time on this channel, go over to the dark side with authors, where I get to give you my top 5 list of my least favourite authors that I have read from in 2021. Coming in at 5th place, and these are literally ranked. Unlike my favourites, these are ranked in that order. Coming in at 5th place is Richard Glover. So, very early on this year, I had a buddy read with my mother. We call the buddy read loosely Mum and Me, and we picked up this book called Love Clancy. Now, the reason why we picked it up was because my mum already had it. I was at her house. I saw the picture of this gorgeous dog on the cover, and I said, Mum, we have to buddy read this. This looks so cute. And so, we started reading it together. The first half of this book was good. But then it started getting really monotonous because the same thing was happening over and over and over again. Every chapter seemed to have a formula to it. I'm not going to give away spoilers, but talking about Phil Stamper as an author, he seemed to formulate every single chapter with the same sort of formula, and you almost knew what to expect as the book went along. Now, this is fine if you're reading a thriller and you're getting towards the end and you go, woo, I got it right, if you did. But if you're reading a book like this, which is a contemporary, and you know what's coming from the moment you're at the halfway mark, every single chapter, it becomes an absolute tedious bore to read. It is time to break some hearts, especially across America. Stars and Stripes, I absolutely love you guys, but I know a lot of you guys love this series and this author. I'm sorry, but she's just not for me. Coming in at number 4 is Marissa Meyer. I'm sorry to say that Marissa Meyer, the reason why she comes in at number 4 is a very similar reason to Richard Glover, in that I found this book to be incredibly monotonous. I am not a fan of monotony. If it is not important, what is it doing there? And there were so many things that came up in this book that were not relevant and were not important and that were incredibly boring. Some people say that book number 1 is probably the worst book in the series, arguably, but it left enough of a dampener on me that I just don't trust Marissa Meyer and I don't want to read the rest of her books. Now, I'm going to give her one Hail Mary, and that will be that the ending of this book was actually really, really good. But the thing is, there are going to be a lot of readers out there who get to about the halfway mark and DNF the book because they're not interested enough to keep going. One half of having an amazing ending is to make sure you have an enticing enough book for the majority of the way through to keep your reader going to get to that ending. I pushed through because of how much people love this book. I wanted to read it and talk about my thoughts on it, but this series and this author is no longer for me. Coming in at number 3 is Stephanie Garber. Okay, I have words, I have things to say, we need to talk. I read Caraval, book number 1, and I absolutely loved this book and was praising Stephanie Garber's name. She made me as mad as the Mad Hatter and took me round the twist and back again in the best way possible. Whether it is happiness, sadness, joy, anger, confusion, whatever it is, and I experienced all of them with this book. It was so good that for the first time this year, I actually broke my TBR and put a rush order onto book 2 because I could not wait to read it. And this is where and why Stephanie Garber comes in at number 3. This book could not have been any more of a disappointment. Ladies and gentlemen, authors of the world, a little bit of advice from a reader to his potential new authors one day is, if you capture lightning in a bottle in your first book, please do yourself the favor of not smashing that bottle and throwing the shards into the trash can because it ruins the series. I call this the Suzanne Collins curse. I could not believe that Stephanie Garber had written something so intriguing from start to end with this book, and quite possibly built a large fandom because of the formula that she had created with this book, and then she decided to completely discard that with this one. This is a plot-driven book. This is a character-driven book. This book revolves around something that becomes incredibly intriguing the more and more you go on through the book, because it's hard not to with what the book revolves around. This book takes that idea to go for a second round, basically, but then what made this book amazing is shoved into the background and covers maybe 1/5 of the book. So disappointed. I am not reading book 3 finale because apparently in book 3 finale, she's completely done away with that thing. That thing that made this amazing and that we only got 1/5 of in this book. In finale, book 3, the final book in the series, it's not there at all. Coming in at number 2, again, I'm sorry, Americans, if I disappoint you with this, but it is the author duo of Christina and Lauren, who publish themselves as Christina Lauren. Keeping to the writing style, this book is advertised as an adult romance, which is what they are writers of. This is not the first book that they've written. This is not their first rodeo. And yet, I just did not believe the romance in this book. By the time we get to the actual romance portion of the book, I felt that it just wasn't realistic enough. If you're going to have a romance book, you need it to be some kind of realistic, right? And it just wasn't. It just didn't make sense to me. It felt so completely rushed, and it would not work this way in reality, so it didn't make any sense to me at all. But if you thought any of those other 4 really, really upset me, you'd be right, but none of them compared to this next author. Coming in at a deserved number 1. My all-time for 2021's first half of the year least by a mile least favourite author has to be Peter Swanson. Okay, Mr. Swanson, let's have some words. This book, Every Value Break, is a 2021 new release, and just for a bit of background information, this is not Peter Swanson's first book. If you want to read a thriller that has no thrilling moments whatsoever, by all means go ahead and read Every Value Break. In fact, Peter Swanson goes out of his way to ensure that you're not going to be scared. In fact, when we get to the point of the reveal, now with most thrillers there is a reveal, so I don't feel that's a spoiler to say, when we get to the point of the reveal, Mr. Swanson literally goes out of his way to make sure that you don't do any more than go, where with most thrillers you would go, with this one, you go, and then you go, oh, okay. I don't know why I jumped there, because that wasn't necessary. Really, this book took until halfway through until anything really kind of thrillerish happened at all. But when the reveal actually happened, there was a moment. Oh, Peter Swanson. My dear, 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 dear Peter Swanson, who this is like the 5th book you've published. There was a moment where I was on the edge of my seat. I was there for a second. And only a second, because Peter Swanson then turns around and said, no, relax, it's fine. And it never got even close to that point again. It was so annoying. He set us up for the perfect thing, and then he just bowed out at the last minute. There was nothing thrilling about this book at all. And Peter Swanson, you need to take a leaf out of Rachel Ryan's book. If I see the name and I'm not even willing to give it a chance, you deserve to be at number 1 of my least favourite authors. But that is it. Those are my top 5 favourite authors of the year and top 5 least favourite authors of the year. Keep an eye out because there's a whole lot more favourites and non-favourites to come this month for the first half of 2021. Letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading!